Hi, geometry students. Today we're going to talk about triangles and categorize them based on the way their sides relate to each other. So you can have isosceles triangles, equilateral triangles, and scalene triangles. Scalene triangles are triangles in which all three sides are different lengths. An isosceles triangle is a triangle in which two of the three sides are congruent. And an equilateral triangle is a triangle in which all three sides are congruent. If we're going to look at the isosceles triangle's quote-unquote body parts, the two sides that are congruent are called the legs of the isosceles triangle, and the side that's not congruent is called the base of the isosceles triangle. Notice the base is included in between the two base angles. And notice the vertex angle is included between the two legs. The isosceles triangle theorem states that if you have an isosceles triangle, then the base angles will be congruent. And the converse is also true. If you see a triangle that has two congruent angles, then you know this must be an isosceles triangle. You know those must be the base angles, so they must be surrounding the base, in which case the other two sides are the legs that are congruent. So using these theorems, pause and solve for the missing angles, and then press play for the solution. The first thing you'll do is use the definition of congruency. If these both measure 21, then I know that they are congruent. And then I can use the isosceles triangle theorem, which states if I have an isosceles triangle, then the base angles are congruent. If these are congruent and I want to find out what they are, I could call them both x, for example, and then I could use triangle sum. 52 plus 2x's would equal 180, and I can solve for x. So pause, solve for the missing angle measurements, and then press play. So just because it's rotated in space, be careful. The congruent sides are the legs, and so this AC is the base, and so the two base angles will be A and C. And so when you have an isosceles triangle, you can use the isosceles triangle theorem. Just make sure you are oriented in space, which are the bases. So A and C are the bases. And the isosceles triangle theorem says those base angles will be congruent. And then we can use triangle sum to find our missing angles, our final missing angle. Pause, find x and y, and then press play for the solution. We can start by recognizing that this is an isosceles triangle. So these are the legs and this is the base, which means these are the two base angles. Now, we can also use our knowledge of linear pairs, always being supplementary. So first we'll say the isosceles triangle theorem states that if you have an isosceles triangle, the base angles are congruent. So we know these are going to be the same. And then you know linear pairs are always supplementary. So if that's 110, this has to be 70, and so y has to be 70 also. And then you can use triangle sum to find your final missing angle, or x. Equilateral triangles are triangles where all three sides are congruent, and if you have an equilateral triangle, then the theorem states the angles will also be congruent. And the converse is also true. If you see a triangle with three congruent angles, then you can assume these sides are congruent as well. So if it's equilateral, it's also equiangular. And if it's equiangular, it's also equilateral, just for triangles. And if all the angles are the same, and they all add up to 180, 180 divided into three congruent parts means they would all have to be 60 degrees. So pause and find the length of AB, and then press play for the solution. The first thing we would do is use triangle sum to find our missing angle. Once we've done that, we see that these three angles are all 60, which means it's equiangular, which tells me it's also going to be equilateral, in which case all three sides will measure 5 units. Pause, Find m and n, and then press play for the solution. We can start by the knowledge that equilateral triangles are also equiangular, so these will all be 60. Then we can use our angle addition postulate. These two angles have to add up to 90, so n has to be 30. And then we can use triangle sum to find m. 90 plus 30 plus 60 equals 180. And I will leave you here with this little baby lion and wish you a great day.